From a libertarian standpoint, we actually talked to expert Pat Michaels at the Cato Institute for a piece I did a couple weeks ago. He's talking about how the globe hasn't warmed any in the past 10 years, and we don't have the technology to substantially reduce emissions, and basically saying we can't legislate our way out of this problem, climate change. What's your reaction to statements like that?
Well, I'm not sure that we need to legislate our way out of it. I have read a number of papers, a number of studies by the Reason Foundation, by Cato, by CEI, Competitive Enterprise Institute, AEI, all sorts of groups out there. And there is general recognition that there is a problem now with global warming. I don't know enough about it, and I don't think anybody knows enough about it to say with scientific definitiveness, this is exactly what the problem is, this is exactly what's caused it, or on the other hand, it's simply something that the Earth goes through every so often and there's really nothing we can do about it. I know enough now to know that we don't know the answers to those questions. But I do think that the Vice President is absolutely correct in saying we do have a problem here. Part of that problem is our continued reliance on carbon-based, non-renewable fuels. That is always going to be problematic for us because the reserves are either dwindling or becoming more difficult and cost prohibitive to secure, or politically difficult to secure. So even if one doesn't buy into the notion of global warming, I think a challenge to the country, as for example Boone Pickens, hardly a bleeding heart liberal, has laid on the table also for America. The challenge is to find alternative ways to fuel our cities, fuel our vehicles, and fuel our way of life. I think that is very appropriate.
Al Gore has said, now I'm paraphrasing his comments, but he was saying that there are way more people who think climate change is a problem and compare it to skeptics, and when reporting on this issue, the skeptics should basically be debunked. This carries through to things like the Senate. They had a couple of hearings where there were no skeptics on the panel at all. There was no other voice. Do you think we should embrace the skeptics on this issue, or should we just accept this as a problem and debunk the skeptics?
Well, I don't think that we should go into this very serious issue on a vote of ayes and nays. It needs to be based on scientific evidence, and in order to develop an appropriate, verifiable base of scientific evidence that will then form the basis for good policy decisions down the road, we have to listen to all the different voices out there. I've never subscribed to the philosophy that the way you develop good policy is to close out every voice except those that you agree with, although that does happen in Washington a lot.
And just switching gears for a minute, I read that the Republicans are concerned about your run for president, that you could take votes away from them in some key states. What's your reaction to that? Does that affect your candidacy at all, or your vision for the country and your campaign?
It certainly doesn't affect what we're doing. What the Republicans ought to be worried about is not Bob Barr. What they ought to be worried about is why is the public tuned out to the Republican Party and the Republican candidate. And it's largely, I think, because the Republican Party has no vision, no agenda, no platform, and no candidate that is able to excite and ignite the American public. That's the problem that the Republicans have right now. It's not Bob Barr. Now, if they focus on me, that's fine. They will lose for sure. But our campaign is oriented toward disaffected conservatives, disaffected Democrats, so-called blue-collar Democrats, and a large segment of voters, primarily young people, in the middle, independent voters. And that's who we're reaching out to.
What influenced you most to run?
Hearing two things. One, hearing from so many people as I've traveled the country over the last couple of years in various capacities who are deeply, very concerned about the direction the country is going in terms of loss of our liberty and loss of our economic freedom because of high taxes, high government spending, and government control of businesses. And secondly, the manner in which the two-party status quo system has stifled creativity, stifled good public policy, and stifled the kind of candidates that the public would like to see.
Last but not least, I was at a discussion yesterday with the Americans for Tax Reform. They were talking about ways to cut taxes and cut government spending, wasteful spending. And they said the best way to do it is we have to give tax cuts to corporations and basically the wealthy, because they provide jobs for people, and poor people have never given other people a job. What do you think about that? Couldn't we say that cutting taxes for the corporations isn't a guarantee they're actually going to put that money toward better benefits and better wages for their actual employees?
The best way to spur economic growth is to cut government spending first. That is job number one, cut government spending. There are a lot of ways that we can do that, and I would do that immediately on taking office as president, to begin the process of significantly cutting government spending, not nibbling at the corners of it like Senator McCain is doing, and not rejecting any notion of cutting government spending as Senator Obama believes. Cutting government spending is the key. It's the key to taxation, and it's the key to eventual tax reform. If you don't tackle government spending first, no matter what form of tax or tax reform you come up with, it's going to be taking too much of people's money.
Do we directly give tax cuts to the middle class, or do we give tax cuts to corporations in the hopes that they'll put that money toward better wages for their employees?
Well, historically, what we see working the best in order to spur economic growth in this country is to cut those taxes that hold back economic growth. And it's usually a mixture of individual or tax cuts to marginal rates on individual taxation, coupled with reductions in the tax rates on capital gains, for example. It's that proper mix that cut as broadly as possible across the economy that provides the best long-term decrease in government spending and growth in private industry.
Any candidates talking about that? Senator Obama or McCain?
Barr.